Welcome to the Local Government Careers Podcast, your one-stop shop to learn about local government careers. This podcast is organized alphabetically by position title, so you can easily find the positions that are most meaningful to you. My name is Sean Metcalf, and I have a unique background in local government. I've been a finance director, human resources director, assistant city manager, and city administrator. Because of these experiences, I'm able to ask my guests questions that give you a well-rounded understanding of each local government position. The reason I'm doing this podcast is to help people find meaningful careers that are aligned with their goals and aspirations. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and share it with your friends. The position that we're exploring today is the position of city manager. I am excited to introduce my guest for today. Her name is Amanda Mack, and she is the city administrator for Harrisburg, South Dakota. She has over a decade of experience as a city manager / administrator in populations ranging from approximately 1,000 to 23,000. She has a master's degree in public administration, bachelor's degree in history from South Dakota State University. Thank you so much again for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about a profession that is near and dear to my heart, and can't wait to hopefully excite people about the profession.
How did you find the position of city manager, and what interested you in applying and going down this career path?
Yeah, well, I had started my post-undergraduate career working in politics. I worked for candidates. I did fundraising. I did issue organizing, field work, and I'd done that for about 10 years, and really was at a point where I wanted something with maybe a little more stability, a little less travel, but wasn't quite sure where that was going to lead me. I've always, since I was very young, been interested in politics and government and how it works, and had been engaged in some different activities on the local level. And as I was trying to figure out, what I wanted to be when I grew up, a friend from college had reached out and asked to have coffee, and I met with him. And at the time, he was the mayor of Worthing, South Dakota, which is a small town just south of Sioux Falls. So it's about 1,000 people, and had met to just catch up. But then also they were in the process of hiring an administrator. And he said, I really think you should consider applying. I think there's a lot of transferable skills to what you've been doing, for the last several years, and think about it. And at the time, I had no idea what a city administrator was. I had not really been exposed to a lot of the city management world. And I thought, well, this could be something that's worth pursuing. The pay is decent. I get to stay working in government. I know how things sort of work process-wise. Yeah. I think this could be a good fit for me. And so interviewed, and the rest is history. And I haven't really looked back. I'm so grateful that, he had the foresight to say, hey, I think you should consider this. I see something in you that you might not see in yourself. And I've always just really appreciated that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it sounds like you kind of gained interest in local government, or I guess that love for public service at an earlier age, kind of getting involved in a variety of things.
Yeah, actually, I can trace it back to about fourth grade. My grandparents were very politically active and started taking me to events with them when I was in fourth grade. And I don't know, there was just something about it that I was really, really drawn to. And then as I, progressed through school, I gravitated towards the arts and humanities, but government especially, and history. I've always just had a real interest in how things work, how we got to where we are today, lessons from the past that maybe we should be reflecting on. And it has long been a passion of mine. It's fun. I have two sons. One is 13, one is 11, and my 13-year-old has a lot of that same kind of interest that I did at his age. Really, how do things work? They come to the office with me every once in a while. I've taken them out to the Capitol to watch session, and I hope that he'll continue to pursue that interest as he goes on through school.
Yeah. No, that's cool to give them those kind of opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
as that sounds like those opportunities are what got you interested in it.
Yeah.
Tell me about your career progression, and I guess you shared some experiences that you were involved in, but now jumping into the city administrator role.
Mm-hmm.
So you started as city administrator, and it was population close to 1,000, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
And
And truly, I really learned a lot at the very basic level. There was I think four full-time staff. So staff management, was vastly different there than it was at some of my other organizations.
yeah.
Learned a lot about the finance world. In fact, I served as the finance officer for a period of time when ours left. And
Uh-huh.
then an opportunity came knocking just down the road in Canton, South Dakota, which is about 3,300 people. Different form of government, so city manager form of government. Moved on to there, really loved our time there. But politically, that community was a little challenging. They had, prior to my coming on board twice, voted on the form of government. And then when I was there, voted on the form of government again to go back to a strong mayor form.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and unfortunately, when I was there, the vote passed by 3 votes, to go back. And
Oh my
so,
gosh.
yeah, so as that campaign was going on, I was an opportunity in Spencer, Iowa was brought to my attention, and I thought, well, it can't hurt to throw my hat in the ring. Need a job. I really like this profession. I'd like to stay in it. And, fortunately that worked out for me. So I was able to make a smooth transition over there. And it's interesting that, Canton, they changed the form of government. They went back to strong mayor, but they recently hired a city administrator. And so, they
Wow.
do see the value in having a professionally managed community.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm glad for them that they've moved down that path. And so yeah, I spent some time in Spencer, Iowa, about 12,000 people. Again, just continuing to learn as a leader, learning about the profession, learning about the inner workings. And then an opportunity in Watertown came up. They changed their form of government to city manager form. My husband grew up 7 miles east of Watertown, and it really made a lot of sense for us to, try and see if that opportunity would be a good one. We could get back closer to family, get back into South Dakota.
Yeah.
And also, to be a first-time manager in any community is such a privilege and a huge responsibility.
Absolutely.
So professionally, it was very, very appealing. And again, I was fortunate that they thought I would be well suited to take on that role. And then, a handful of months ago, Harrisburg came calling. So I take each job with the intent to just be there until it doesn't make sense to be there anymore. I've never, outside of when I was in Canton and they were voting on the form of government, I've never really sought out other places. It's just people have brought it to me, or, hey, I think you should consider this. And that's how it was with Harrisburg. It's the fastest growing city in South Dakota. It's in the Sioux Falls metro area. So community wise, it's about half the size of where I was at before. But it'll be double the size that it is currently, in the next 5 to 8 years.
Yeah.
And the growth trajectory is something that I've not experienced in my career yet. And being in a community that is not chasing growth, that is trying to get ahead of it, that's trying to be responsible with the growth, is a very different professional mindset. The way we talk about things here is very different than in my previous communities. And the way that you manage staff, the way that you manage that growth is certainly a professional stretch for me. And that is very valuable to me. I like to be challenged. I'm a lifelong learner. And I, again, am very, very humbled to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very different experience to be in more of a very growing community. That would be very different.
Yeah.
When you took your first city administrator gig,
Mhm.
did anything surprise you? Like the mayor had visited with you about the position, but when you
Mhm.
got into it, did you say, "Oh, I didn't expect this," or does anything come to mind with that?
Oh man, I think every place that I've been, I have sat back and said, "Huh, I didn't expect that." Um, to name specifics, I really can't. And I was so green in Worthing that I might not have recognized that. Hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing it that way, or oh,
Uh-huh.
this is unique. But one thing it has remained true across all of the communities is that the needs really are the same. And it's how you prioritize those needs, how you get creative around problem solving and building partnerships that is different in each community.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you too. And
Mhm.
I know, I guess if people don't, some people listening might not know my background, but I've, been in a couple of city manager roles and different cities, and it is generally pretty similar. And of course, every city has some differences. Some might have more services that it's providing than others, but
Mhm.
generally, like the core services are the same.
Yeah, a trend that I've seen throughout my career, and it is a little bit alarming, um, is how political local government issues have become. And from my perspective, it's not necessarily the elected officials who are turning them political. It's the residents, it's the constituency groups. And there
Yeah.
really are some things that just aren't political. What road gets paved before another is not a political decision. It's based on, you know, science and budget.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
um, we've really, like, societally gone away from trusting experts. And some of that blame is on local government and state government and federal government, because we've taken the trust of our constituents for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I
And we
think
have a
that,
lot of work to do.
yeah, it does seem like I guess there's a trend in local government, and like you said, that could be related to state or federal. Different,
Hmm.
those influences seem to be making it so that there's less trust in government, which
Yeah.
trickles down to those residents. So yeah, for someone that they may be wondering what's the difference between a city manager and a city administrator.
Well, I think it depends on where you're at jurisdictionally. So in South Dakota, a city manager is an actual form of government. So the confines around the elected body, what authorities a city manager has or doesn't have, is outlined in state statute. Whereas city administrator in South Dakota is uh, same duties by and large. You run the day-to-day operations, but there are no statutory protections on that position. So if you are coming in as a city administrator, you're likely in a community that still has a strong mayor form of government, either commission form or aldermanic, and you want to make sure you got a strong contract in place. But the day-to-day duties are very, very similar. It's, what is required to go to the council for approval, and what do you have as the administrator? What authorities do you have to make decisions day to day?
Mm, mm,
And,
yeah,
in South Dakota, the day-to-day decisions are prescribed in state statute for city managers. They are not for administrators.
how would you describe the key responsibilities of a city manager or city administrator? What are those key things that this position does?
Well, the key function of an administrator or manager or chief administrative officer or CEO, there's a lot of different titles out there, is managing the day-to-day operations. And so depending on the size and structure of your organization, that can really vary. When I was in very small communities, like I mentioned, I was the finance officer and the administrator. I've been the HR person, actually in most of the communities I've been in, except in Watertown. And so you have to be more of a generalist than a specialist as an administrator, at least in my opinion.
Yes.
Every single day truly is different. Now you have projects and issues and initiatives that you're working on that, you probably touch those every day. But I am always amazed, it doesn't matter the community I've been in, at the things that pop up, pretty regularly where I say, I really didn't think I'd be thinking about or talking about or working on that today. And yeah, a huge part of this job, and I don't always get it right, so I want to be clear about that, is the relationship piece. So the relationship that you as the administrator have with your elected body, that you have with your leadership team, with your community partners, is critical in building the community that you've been hired to build.
Yeah. And what's your, I guess, starting with city council, what's your approach to managing the relationship that you have with, say, the mayor and city council?
Well, I like to start out with what I'm comfortable with, so it's one-on-ones, it's bi-weekly reporting, it's trying to, put information in front of them that I think would be helpful in the decision-making process. But as you get a little more established in your position, or as new members come on to your body, it really is about meeting them where they are at and trying to discern, how do they want to receive information? What does a strong relationship look like to them? And, there is a level of responsibility on the elected officials to make the relationship between the administrator, manager, and them work as well. So if a manager is scheduling one-on-ones or scheduling small group meetings and you're just not showing up for it, well, I think you have an obligation to say, hey, that doesn't work for me. I'd prefer that we do something different. Or it's difficult to take complaints about communication or about, operations truly seriously when there's not an effort being put in to make that successful.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm. And I would say the same with residents. People are as engaged as they choose to be. And if you care about something, it is incumbent upon you to educate yourself and be involved. We had an election, a handful of weeks ago, and there's a school board election coming up next week, I think it is. And I've heard, they don't advertise the election. They don't, communicate with people. And then when you go back and you look at, the mailers that have gone out and the stuff that's on social media and the stuff that's on the website, I would challenge residents, constituents, elected officials, tell us how you want it to be different. Because sometimes we only know what we know. And if there is a different or better way to do it, then tell us. But to just sit there in the void and complain or question, it truly isn't helpful. And I've been fortunate my entire career to work with truly gifted, talented people who are there to serve and who are open to feedback and who want to do well. If you're not telling them how to do well by your standards, we're just going to continue to be at odds.
I think that's some really wise advice that you have to manage those relationships. It's something that you can't just hope that someone sees something. No, you gotta be talking to these individuals and sharing your perspectives. I think that is a really wise
Well,
thing that
and
you said there.
yeah, and I think too, I've shifted my own thinking about it from managing relationships to nurturing relationships,
Hmm.
and there is a nuanced difference there. If you're managing a relationship, you're checking the boxes. Oh, I sent this email. Oh, I made this phone call. But if you're nurturing that relationship, you're doing all that you can. And again, you can only do so much to be invested in a healthy, productive relationship with that elected body, with that constituency group, with that resident. Um, and sometimes it's not what they want. That's okay too.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that distinguishing word there. Do you have any other maybe things that you have done to nurture those relationships, whether that be with the residents or your maybe individual engagement there, or with city council members, staff members?
I try really hard to be as responsive as I can. Sometimes that's to a fault where you make yourself too accessible, and then expectations are that you are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Um, but I also recognize that the way that I like to receive communication is not the same as how other people do. So, if you want to meet with me, let's meet. If you want me to call you, I'll call you. If you want me to text you, that's how we'll do it. If you never read an email I send, then I got to find out a different way to get information to you. And some of that comes in that relationship nurturing piece, like really honing in on a person's self-interest and what motivates them. From a community perspective, I try to be present. If there's a community event going on, I want to be there. One, because I think it's part of my job, and two, I also live in this community. I want to be a part of it, not just as the city administrator or city manager, but as a resident, as someone who understands the value of participation and showing up and supporting other people and groups, because that's really what takes a community from surviving to thriving. It's that emotional infrastructure piece that we sometimes really gloss over in this world, and to our detriment, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. So, what would you say are the most challenging parts of your job? And then on the flip side, what would you say are the most rewarding parts of your job?
Well, they're the same. The most challenging is the people part, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes I've heard people say, I've probably said it myself, this job would be great if I didn't have to deal with people. But man, this job would also suck if I didn't get to deal with people. And so, we tend to, I do, I don't want to speak for others, but I tend to, really get hung up on the negative, when in reality, the negative is a very, very small fraction of the people that I deal with or the work that I get to do. And so, every community I've been in, I've been blessed to make, strong friendships, um, get to be a part of just some really cool things. And so that makes it worth it to have to deal with. Like today, we had a pretty angry resident in who was very unpleasant. And that is impactful. It's impactful to our frontline staff who, God bless them, they don't know the nuances of a construction project. They're processing utility bills and
Hmm.
reserving spaces for people. They're not managing a construction firm, but they take the brunt of it, and that can be really, really frustrating.
Hmm.
Um, Another real challenge that I see in this world, and I talk about this a lot, is the almost paralysis that I see with elected officials in making decisions. Not making a decision is detrimental to your community. And just make the decision, take the vote. Whatever happens after that is what happens after that. But it can be a real challenge to overcome when they don't feel equipped. Either they feel like staff hasn't given them, enough information or the right information, or politically, hey, if I make this decision, how am I going to be received? Is there going to be blowback? And I think culturally, I feel bad for elected officials by and large. Some of them I don't, but we have created this environment that it's not okay to change your mind. And we know that's not how good governance works. When you're presented with new information, when it makes sense to change trajectory on something, you should have the support and the freedom and the wherewithal to do that. The tagline on my email is, I reserve the right to be smarter today than I was yesterday. And man, I live that every day. I'm like, geez, that was dumb for me to do. All right, well, now I got to go eat some crow and move on. But we tend to, I see it, and it hurts my heart a little bit, because by and large, the elected officials that I've been fortunate to work with are good people who want good things for their community. But no matter the political side that you're on, are really in this quandary that they don't feel like they can actually make decisions. And that is very, very problematic.
Yeah. It's, I think as soon as someone gets in that role, they realize just like how challenging it is. I'm sure in some cases they know exactly what they're getting into, but it can be, I think it can be really hard where you're the recipient of like a lot of issues all the time, and you may not have all the answers to it. It's just like it really is a tough position to be in. And so I guess that goes back to what you were saying of helping, guiding these individuals who are new to these sorts of roles. And how going back to staff for a second, how do you help your staff to, I guess, handle some of those issues that come up, political issues? Like, what kind of guidance do you give to them?
The more that we as staff can stay out of the politics of something, the better. Really try to adhere to, again, when I say try to, I mean, we're putting in our best effort, but we don't always get it right every day. Really trying to adhere to the mantra that a question asked by one is answered to all. Because sometimes you get in some weird political situations if you've got one elected official that's asking for information and, hey, I'm just answering their question, but you got other elected officials who aren't even aware that the questions are being asked, and why are they being asked, and how's it relevant to what we're doing. Consistency is really important. Vulnerability, with each other in the work that we're doing is sort of the, if you follow Pat Lencioni at all, it's the foundation of a functional organization. Being able to trust one another and be vulnerable enough to call out where we've gotten stuff wrong, where we've missed the mark, celebrate what we've done well. And none of that is easy. It really takes a lot of work, and it takes significantly more time than you even realize when you're trying to build a healthy culture in an organization. And me as the leader too, it's real easy to fall back into old ways and old patterns that don't suit you or the people you're leading well. And so being able to recognize that, and if you need to bring everybody into a room and say, hey, I'm asking for a restart, we missed the mark on this, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. Yep. I love your advice there. The being vulnerable, I think, is really important.
Now dealing with
barriers.
Yeah. Now dealing with angry constituents, I don't think it's appropriate for people to treat other people like that, period, no matter the field that you're in. I just cannot ever imagine walking into any kind of office and screaming and yelling and cursing at people. So I don't tolerate that really well. But once we're through with that, then the questions become, all right, what are the takeaways from what this person was saying? Do we need to have a conversation with a contractor, with a staff person? If we do, let's go have it. But then a reminder that, one, it doesn't excuse the behavior, but we also don't know what's going on in someone's life. So we got, trying to give some grace. But also, it's a very small fraction of people who behave like that. And our community is full of people who don't behave like that. So don't focus on it. Move on. And that is the best that we can do.
Yeah. If you were to attempt to break down your time like into percentages, what would you say, like I spend overall 30% of my time is just like working with city council, 20% of it is with staff and projects, or like how, and this is a really hard question because there is such a variety in this role, and you can have anything thrown at you, really. So, but if someone is trying to understand, what it's like, how would you break it out?
That is really, really hard. And it is varied depending on the community that I've been in.
Yes.
So using my current community, again, I've only been here about 100 days, so I don't have it all figured out yet. But I probably spend about 30% of my time with the council in some kind of capacity. I gotta make sure I'm doing my math correctly here too. I probably spend, 60% of my time just on development. So whether that's meeting with developers, internal meetings with engineers and development services staff, constituent questions, comments, whatever about developers, our partner organizations in development. So what's that put us at?
A lot to do with your
like 90%? Does that put me at 90% already?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to back that down. I'm going to say 50%. And then I'd say another probably about 15% with staff. I do have a really small staff, and they are really intertwined in all that development work. So I'm interacting with them in that capacity. And then the remainder would be with the community at large, which is, our residents and our partner organizations. But I do expect that as we staff up, as I get more established in this role, those percentages are gonna change, probably shift pretty dramatically. Now, in other communities, it's been 60% dealing with staff and 40% dealing with everything else. Yeah, it really depends on the organization and the community you're in and the needs that you're dealing with at the time that the question is asked.
Yeah, you described that really well. Yeah, it can be very different, I guess, when people, if someone is looking at that job advertisement, and usually there's quite a bit of information about the community or their top priorities that they have, that will have a lot to do with the priority of your work.
Yes.
What would you say your schedule is like?
In what context? Day to day, or
like your hours worked? Like,
I'm not sure that I'm a good person to be asking that question because, like I mentioned earlier, I've not been good in the past about setting healthy boundaries around work. And I'm trying real hard to do that in my new community, for my own well-being, but also for just making sure that I'm having the right kinds of relationships with the council, with staff, with the community. And so, I'm working late tonight, but I do have a lot of flexibility. We close at noon on Fridays, which is great.
Nice.
I would say that I definitely work more than a 40-hour week regularly. Some weeks it's 45, some weeks it's 50. Some of that is my own doing, right? Like there's things that I just, hey, I want to learn more about this, or I need to dive into this a little bit deeper. And that's on me. It's certainly not an expectation that's been put on me, at least not by this council. And I very much appreciate that. Um, but there are some weeks, if you've got a big project going on, or you're trying to get something across the finish line, or a big meeting that are just going to take time. Um, if your listeners are thinking about applying or are applying, for city management positions, deputy city administrators, managers, I would encourage them to really ask those kinds of questions. Like, what is the expectation around time? And if the community is saying that they have flexibility, what does that mean? Because one person's definition of flexibility can be very different than another's. And if you are far apart on that, it can cause some frustration that is just unnecessary.
Yeah. Even having for most people, they just have one supervisor, and it's really important to understand what that supervisor expects.
Yeah.
And I would say even more important to ask that question, because with a governing body, like you're saying, you could have a variety of different opinions there. So it's important for them to kind of vocalize that, get that out there, and come to a conclusion on what those expectations are together as a unified group. Yeah. What would be the expected salary for someone in this position? And I know that, of course, it depends on the population. So maybe we could start with like what would be like a smaller population? Maybe it's like 1,000 to 5,000.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I think it really depends on the region, truthfully. Yeah. I'm trying to think. So when I started with the city of Worthing, I think I came on board at 46,000. I moved to the city of Canton. I think I left there at a little over 70. Moved into Spencer, and I was at 115 when I started there. I think it was at 130-ish when I left.
And the populations of those, just so people know.
1,000, 3,300, 12,000. Okay. I left the city of Watertown, which is 23,000 at 174. And I'm here in Harrisburg, which is just under 11,000, and I'm at 225, which seems like a lot for a community of that size, but the sheer volume of work that's happening here, I certainly don't think it's out of line, and and being in the metro area will certainly change also what what positions are salaried at.
Yes, and I would also add that state to state can be pretty different too. There's some states that pay better, and some that pay worse too.
Yeah, and there's some states, I can't think of them off the top of my head, that have caps on what public officials can make, and so it is, and some states have laws on the books about city managers' contracts, what can be in them, what can't, how they get paid out, things like that. So it really is dependent on where you're at, and in some areas, you're really competing with the private sector as well.
Yes. Is there a certain type of personality that someone would need to have to do well in this job?
I don't think so. I teach public administration at South Dakota State, and I've told my students since the first class that the best leaders are the self-aware leaders. So knowing who you are, knowing where you excel, knowing where you fall short, knowing if you can improve where you fall short, and where to lean on others will take you a long way in this profession. If you don't like working with people, this probably isn't the place for you.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. What kind of professional organizations do you participate in?
So I'm a member of the ICMA. I've been a member since I started in the profession. I am involved. I sit on a couple of committees. The South Dakota City Managers Association, also a member, actively involved in that. For a long time, I was a member of the IEDC, the International Economic Development Council. I have a education in economic development as well, so I've been involved in that world. I just became a SHRM member, and I've kind of focused my education as I've gone through my career where the needs of the community and organization that I'm currently in are. So I have a certificate from the University of Wisconsin in labor relations because my previous community I was in had 3 very large unions, and even though I've had a union background, I've been a union worker, union employee, I've been on the side of management, I still felt like there was a lot to learn to make sure that I was representing the organization, but then also doing my best to protect the interests of the employees. Here we don't have an HR department. We need to grow our staff, but the needs are so great that HR is maybe a little lower on the list. So, like I said, I'm a SHRM member, also working towards just furthering my skills in HR so that I can help fill that gap until we're at a point where we're ready to add those positions.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that is really good that you're basically accommodating the needs of each city that you have and engaging in those sorts of things. That makes a lot of sense. So in preparation for someone applying for a position like this, what would be the preferred or required or required education, skills, abilities that someone would need to have?
Well, when I started in the profession, I had no skills in city management, so I would not let that deter you if you're interested. I think, at least having an interest or an awareness of how government functions is important to success in any kind of role in government. Knowing if you're going to work for a city, knowing what form of government it has, knowing how decisions are made will set you up to be successful. Education wise, my bachelor's degree is in history and political science. I think that has been valuable if you're looking to move further up in your career, either into larger communities or into larger roles. I do think the public administration master's degree is very valuable, and there are incredible programs throughout the country who offer that. I'll put a plug in for the University of South Dakota. I got my master's degree there through their EMPA program. I was managing a community. I had small kids. It was an online program. I was able to do it in a year and really worked for what I needed at the time, and helped set me up for future success. Business is good. I would advise though that the private sector world is very different than the public sector. And there are a lot of conversations about running government like a business, which is really great until you get to a point where you just can't.
Yep.
So, I really think, my deputy city administrator is a licensed engineer, certified public works manager, spent most of his career doing public works related things, so the, accountants, I've got a friend who's a city administrator who retired from the fire service out in California. So really it's about being able to lead people and being able to take direction, being able to cast a vision, and then, work to implement that with the partners you have around you. I think education in general is important because it helps teach you how to think critically.
Yeah. And probably, I would say in most cases, you probably need to have a bachelor's degree is what employers are going to put on that job application.
Yes.
So what would you say is the best way to get your foot in the door for that first time administrator position?
Well, be involved. If there are committees or boards or projects happening, in the community that you want to serve in, get involved there. Also, maybe be willing to take a frontline position or something that you can strategically place yourself in the path to become a successful candidate to be the administrator if you don't have a lot of local government experience. Be willing to go have coffee with the mayor. Ask them what they're looking for, or the current city manager. Hey, I hear you're leaving. Can you tell me the good, the bad, the ugly? What advice would you have for someone who's looking to apply? The state associations are really great at being a resource for new people, those looking to get into the profession. There's a lot of resources available for people who want to be a part of this, this community of managers.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen opportunities for internships that are a little bit closer related to being a city manager?
Oh yeah, yeah. In bigger communities, they're like the city manager themselves might have an intern or two. I'm hopeful that we can bring on a couple of interns this summer, more in a generalist type role, so they can get their hands dirty with multiple different areas. If you're in school, if you're in an MPA program, you're an undergraduate, definitely be working with your advisors. The ICMA has some really great programs for fellowships, internships, things like that. So I'd encourage them to be a member of the ICMA first and foremost. It is some of the best professional development that I've been able to be a part of in my career. And then just the network and the resources that it provides people is really, really valuable.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
How competitive is it to get into a position like this? What's the market look like?
It is a city manager's market right now. Now, I think the positions are competitive, but you're seeing a lot of across the country, managers and administrators retiring, and the ability for someone to come into this kind of role, green, is pretty ripe.
Have you had any mentors that have helped you kind of in this career path? And would you
Oh,
recommend having a good mentor?
oh gosh, they are the lifesavers at times. Yeah, I mean, I consider a couple of people real career mentors, and I've had people that I would consider just sort of life mentors. And if you can find someone who's willing to fill that role for you, do it. I've worked with a professional coach throughout my career as well. I would highly recommend that. The thing that I appreciate about working with a professional coach is they call you out on your own crap. Hey, you're getting in your own way here. Maybe you should stop doing that. But that all, again, it comes back to being willing to be vulnerable and say, I don't know what to do here, or I don't know how to handle this, or I need some help. I want to grow and I'm not sure how to. And so, yeah, being willing to say that, I think is a hallmark of a true and strong leader.
Yeah. Where could someone find some resources to getting some, like a career coach? Do you have any recommendations with that?
So again, back to the ICMA, they do offer coaching. I think with coaching, though, it really needs to be personalized. So the person that I've worked with off and on throughout my career, I've built a relationship with, they know where to push, where not to
Mm-hmm.
push. You could get just some general career, hey, take a look at my resume. Hey, can you help me prep for an interview? But when you're in the thick of it, you want somebody who knows you, knows your strengths, your weaknesses, knows what you're capable of, and will push you to live into that capability. And, you've got my contact information, so please feel free to share it when you post this. But I'm happy to be a resource for anyone. In fact, I got connected with a woman out of California just through LinkedIn quite a while ago. She reached out to me. It was sort of a cold call, if you will. And hey, I'm applying for jobs. I'd like to pick your brain. I prepped with her for an interview, and she still keeps in touch and keeps me up to date on, where she's applying and how it's going. And I think you just got to be willing to put yourself out there as well. And I have found LinkedIn to be very valuable in building a network of public administrators across the country, who are doing really great and innovative things, but who also, will shoot you a note of encouragement, or, hey, I saw that you posted about this. Can you talk me through it? How'd you guys accomplish it? And are more than willing to share what they know. So it also doesn't have to be any kind of formal thing either. It's just a willingness to put yourself out there.
Yeah. One thing that I've heard some people describe, and I know I've kind of felt this too from time to time, is that when you get into that position, it can sometimes feel a little bit lonely too, because you have to have a professional distance, of course, very friendly, but professional distance in this sort of a position. So just another reason to have a good mentor, have a good network of people that you can just reach out to when you're having a rough day or something, That
is 100% accurate. Our city manager group here in South Dakota is small but mighty. And they are the best, just salt of the earth, incredible people first and foremost, but they sure know how to lift your spirits. They also are not afraid to, say, yeah, that was pretty crappy what happened. And we're sorry that happened, but we're going to be here to help you get through it as well.
Yeah, especially in those cities that are close near you or in that area, that can be such a great resource.
Yeah. And when I was in Iowa too, the Iowa City Managers Group is also incredible. It's a lot larger than South Dakota, but they just it's I don't know, this profession. There's a lot of us in it, but it is still a pretty small community of people when you really think about it.
Mm-hmm. And I've had similar experiences. And I haven't got to know the groups here yet because I've just barely got here. But the experiences that I've had in the past have been all really positive in these like ICMA organizations that are based in your state and region. There's just always been such great people to associate with and to get help from.
Yeah.
We're kind of nearing the end of the questions that I have. As you maybe reflect just kind of on the conversation that we've had, is there anything else that comes to your mind as far as like, I really think someone considering this profession should like think about this? Maybe there's a question we haven't covered that you feel like would be valuable to share.
I think when I will speak for myself, when I got into this profession, I underestimated just how public it actually is. Whether we want it to be or not, it is. And sometimes that's really great and it's really fun. And other times it is not. And so having a keen awareness that, you're going to be in a grocery store and somebody's going to come and talk to you about whatever it is that ails them that day. People are going to say things about you that are, not true and hurtful. And it's their behavior is not a reflection of you and who you are, but you do have to figure out how to process that and deal with that. And especially in an age of, hyper partisanship and social media running rampant, you got to stay true to yourself in this, and it can be very easy to be consumed by it. So don't let that happen.
Yeah, that can be very, very hard. So it's basically just you're saying stick to your moral compass of what you believe and what you think is most important. When you're in this position or in local government positions,
Mhm.
there are just a million different opinions out there in the
Yes.
city.
Yeah.
And you quickly learn that, it's impossible to make everyone happy. So you just got to stick to what you feel is most important. And then
Yeah.
of course, what you've said several times is be vulnerable at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. And if you get something wrong, be willing to say you got it wrong.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to share, or any maybe even shout outs to people that have been meaningful to you?
Oh gosh, I could do shout outs for a very long time. um, but I that the South Dakota City Managers Group, I mean, they truly are just really wonderful people. I might not get to talk to them every day, but they seem to know when to check in, and I try to reciprocate that back, out to them. It really is the greatest job. I don't know what else I'd be doing if I weren't in city management. The variety of work that I get to do, the variety of people that I get to work with and come in contact with is incredible. And I know that the work that I'm a part of does make a difference. And that is very, maybe that's the millennial in me. I don't know. That's very important. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know that I could do it if I didn't feel like I was making a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and it basically every day. I mean, from hour to hour, it seems like the things that you're working
Yeah.
on, even if there's times where it's not seen, that what you're doing is meaningful.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that really look up to this position, and
Hmm.
it means a lot to them. So
Yeah.
the way and that goes from, employees to citizens to your city council. Like it's something that can really make a big impact on a community. And it
Yes.
can also be the other way too if it's not handled well. It can
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a very important role.
I agree. I'm privileged to get to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Amanda, thank you so much again for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been very fun.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too. And I think that if someone is, considering this as a profession, they've got some really, really solid advice from you today.
Yeah, I
So,
hope
and
so.
yeah, no, really. And I know so. Since I've been in similar roles, I know that what you've shared would be very helpful for someone that is considering this career. So